Well, it's now that time that we usher in our guest, Dr. Julian Rowa, who is a conversational expert. Thank you very much indeed for honoring our invitation, Dr.
Thank you, Tom, for having me.
Yeah. Now, there were that last clip, you know, we saw the reactions from the members of parliament, from the Kenyans at large, and they were responding to the president's penultimate State of the Nation address. So what is your initial reaction to the State of the Nation address by His Excellency?
Yeah, Tom, it's very interesting that we are getting mixed what do you call it, verdicts from those that actually should be having all the information at their disposal to be able to have one version of what the truth is. Having watched the President's very long and very elaborate presentation on the State of the Nation address, I am persuaded that he has done a commendable job. The reason that I say that is he actually shared numbers telling us where he found the country in a certain aspect and where that is today. So when he talks about, you know, putting people on power grid, 1.7 million households, I think that's what he said. And then he compared it, I can't remember the number he compared it with. That cannot be ignored. That's a phenomenal number. When you look at the infrastructure, that is something we don't need to debate. We can all see it. He talks about hospitals, where he found it, and I think there's a growth of more than 48% within just the hospital infrastructure itself. Then the digging of the boreholes, again, we've seen significant growth. And when I was listening to him, I was, wait a minute, how come I don't know all this?
So it sort of comes through like...
I was surprised.
You're surprised?
I was surprised.
An indictment on somebody, you think?
Well, I would like to say that I think the way communication is packaged to the populace or to the citizenry to be able to consume and understand what's going on is not very well or effectively done. Because if it was, some of the mixed reactions that we're seeing happening on the screen wouldn't have been there. That's number one. But I'd like to hasten to add that when I start to interpret or analyze his intentions as the president of this country, I'm seeing somebody who is asking us to take a short-term pain for long-term gain. A lot of what is putting in place today will not accrue as a benefit directly to the citizenry today. But over a space of 2 to 3 to 4, 5 years, then we will look back and say, what we are reaping today are the benefits of the pain that we suffered 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And one of those things obviously will be infrastructure, and I know we'll be talking about that extensively in a bit. But let me just get your reaction, because in his preamble, the preamble of his speech, he spoke about focusing on building bridges and selflessness. And if I may just quote, he also said, what did happen will happen. What didn't happen will happen. What is your sense of that statement coming from HE? One, I think the principles behind BBI, I mean, there are different understanding and different versions of it out there. Some of us see it as an instrument being used to, to push a certain agenda for a certain political wing in the country. But progressively, as you listen to the president speak and you look at the development that we are beginning to see under his leadership, then you begin to appreciate the need of working as a team in cohesion. I am reminded of a remark he made towards the end of that speech where he said, we are not competitors. We are comrades sharing a common vision. For me, that was very, very, very powerful. And now you can begin to see how it correlates, how development correlates with building bridges or having a cohesive society. So within that spirit, I'm persuaded that it is something that we need to pursue. As regards to what didn't happen will happen, as a president who is leaving office, I'm increasingly seeing it as he has no stake in it, but he would like to do it for the benefit of the country. Now, that's also a very powerful, powerful statement, because many times when we formulate or construct some of these interventions, we do them for our personal benefits. But for him to insist that he still thinks it's the dose of medicine we need going forward, I think we should analyze it for what he has actually said it to be. So I'm persuaded that he may have to use other channels to see whether some of the provisions within BBI can still see the light of day. I know one of those big issues was the positions that will be created under the BBI. The argument has been we expand the government so that we have more inclusion. The care that we must take is that in the process of inclusion, we should not exclude. Sometimes this is inevitable, that in including, you know how sibling rivalry works.
Yeah.
In inclusion, you may be excluding, but then the president is called upon to do a lot more to bring everybody on board, to remove the level of suspicion that may be residing on either side of the political divide, so that he can live a cohesive society, that which he wishes to see as he exits office. So they still work for him to do.
They still work for him to do. And some politicians who are on the opposing side, some of them, had threatened not to give the function a wide berth. But we saw them. We saw them, attend. And we also saw, because the last State of the Nation address, Right Honorable Raila Odinga was not in attendance, but we saw him attending today.
By reaction?
What was your interpretation? Because I know it all flows into the explanation that the president gave about the doctrine of the handshake.
Yeah.
But what did you see from where you were?
I think as a country we must get to a point where we are saying that we have fundamental issues of governance of the country that we must not ignore, and that we must be active participants on. We must divorce our political, personal feelings with the national agenda of the country. So what I'm saying, the side of the political wing that threatened not to attend, I think they were left with very little choice, because this is probably the last official State of the Nation address by the president. And it is important for those who are opposing his way of doing things and those who actually support the way he does things to be seen to be working in cohesion. Even as you're criticizing it, you're criticizing what he has done from a place of information. So I think it was something they could not avoid doing. Staying away would have made them look really, really bad. So going in and giving their contribution and their comment on what they felt, for me, sounded a lot more legitimate.
So a legacy president, and I mean, this is the second last address that he's giving on the State of the Nation. So based on what he said, do you think that he has built a good case for himself?
The answer is yes and no. Yes, because like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the investments that he has put in place, they're long-term. And I think many of us as citizens of this country will probably choose to remember him for the economic benefits of the country not trickling down into our pockets, not cognizant of the fact that the investment he has put in will take time to accrue interest or to accrue benefits. So the situation I see is, in the short run, we will not have very kind words on our president Uhuru Kenyatta, but 2-3 years down the line we will look back and say, whatever we are reaping now as a country, whatever we are reaping now as a nation, is a direct contribution of the work of the President of the Republic of Kenya. And that's why I am really crying out loud that those who are packaging President's mission, vision, messages could do a better job in educating, creating awareness, letting people know what is happening on the ground and when they should expect the benefits to accrue to them. And I think it's a strategic direction.
It's a strategic direction.
We should grant him that.
He actually even gave an example of the 27-kilometer Nairobi Expressway, and he said that we're looking at 12 minutes from Lolongo to Kiambu in Rironi.
The efficiency that brings is just amazing. And I'm not holding brief for the president. I have no political inclination. But the efficiency.
But these are facts.
These are
facts.
Think? Yeah, these are facts. And the only thing I would ask is we need somebody on the ground to validate and verify everything that the president said. But assuming that it was true, that's a beautiful place to be as a country. He gave the example of as you're on that road, in the former structure, you'd fly to Addis Ababa and be back when this other person is still on the road trying to get to their destination. Now you can imagine what that means in terms of economic development, in terms of savings. So what we need to do, the minister in charge or the CS in charge of transport or the one in charge of trade, they should also come out and tell us. In terms of value addition, what has accrued to the country? Put that also in numbers so that we can see. The minute we see that numbers don't lie, we can go back and say, yes, clearly he knows what he is doing. But that to me is the missing link.
He also talks about MV Kenya, MV Uhuru, I think, in Kisumu.
That was amazing.
One trip. 3 trips of Atanka, 1 trip of MV Uhuru.
Exactly. And again, you can now see the efficiencies that comes to that. The caveat that I put to that argument is, are we cannibalizing other segments of trade?
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
You could, let me take the example, I'll come back to MV Uhuru. We can take the example of SGR. The people at the coast have really lamented the change of strategy, where they're saying, being asked to move their goods and whatever through the rail has denied them business opportunities. Now, for me, these are expected. Every time there's change, there's bound to be benefits and there's bound to be some losses in one aspect or the other. Okay. But then we should look at the big picture and say, have we baked a bigger pie by having this SGR operationalized? So if the size of the pie was, for argument's sake, was 10%, and by making this change, it has moved to 15%, that's a benefit to the nation. And we must accept that some people will have to take in the pain that comes with it. But again, these numbers are not being churned out. So the only thing that we know as the citizens is that the coastal region of Kenya has been denied of opportunities for the business, and that I don't think is a very good narrative for the country. Now, coming back to MV Uhuru, I was particularly very pleased because I kept asking, why the fascination with the lake? Almost 50 years later. Yeah, what's the fascination with this? And at some point you may think it's political. But then when he comes out and he tells you this is what it means, then you realize there's actually an economic value to it. So when you talk about 3 times the tanker, the only thing then I would say, I'm hoping then that means, more oil being sold to the other side. That means an expanded market. That means efficiency, and so the cost of doing business is growing low. And that again should accrue as a benefit to the citizen by, how much probably they buy fuel or whatever, given the efficiencies that are argued will come with it. So MV Uhuru for me was a pleasant surprise. It
was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
And it ties in very well to the narrative of the blue economy.
Correct.
Yeah.
It does. It sits in very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's look at, you also touched a little bit on the Kenya Meat Commission.
Oh, that was...
I think the work that has been done by the men in uniform.
Yeah.
You also talked about NMS.
Yeah.
And what I want to ask you, as a conversational expert, what are we learning from what is going on and the kind of work we are seeing KDF doing? Because we are seeing results.
I want to start by saying that his decision to engage KDF in work that should be done by mainstream citizen is unprecedented. But again, he has decried the lack of work ethics when we're given those responsibilities. So he decided to draw from the military. And I think probably he did a lab test to see how effectively that works. And he must have liked the results to want to continue in that direction. So I still want to hold that in my considered view, by way of prudence, that would not be the right thing to do, because that is not KDF's core responsibility or core business. But one would argue, this is the flip side. Yeah.
One would argue, before you bring in the flip side, that they are first Kenyans and then members of the disciplined forces. And above that, we are seeing results.
And that's when I was coming with my flip side. What we are learning now from KDF is that they have a different model of doing business. Their work ethics appears to be totally different from what the ordinary civilian is used to. I also want to think about the aspect of discipline, work-related discipline, and the culture around it. And as argued today, we are seeing results. What that then tells the rest of us, ordinary citizens who are also occupying big offices, is what is KDF doing differently? What can we learn from them? And I want to agree with you, he has all the right to draw from them, because they're Kenyans just like you and me. It's just that this dynamics of their core job and everything sometimes comes into the way. But I'm persuaded today, as a management expert, to go back to KDF to find out the models of their work, to see how they execute the culture behind it, so that we can all borrow from their discipline. Okay. And I think that's a big thing. So in the short run, I think it's an amazing thing. But the challenge for us as civilians is to learn from that. So President Kenyatta has given us something else to think about. Yeah.
Now, of course, he also spoke about his administration recording growth right in the middle of COVID. Again, what are we learning here?
This is interesting. And economists will be called upon to analyze this in a lot more detail, because all odds were against us. Being a third world country or a developing country, we were meant to have had very severe adverse effect on what COVID could do. But what have you seen? Just what you've said. He says in Q2 of this year, we recorded 2.1 or 2.01% growth.
Growth.
The highest ever seen in the country.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I still don't know what to assign that to.
Yeah.
Is it the infrastructure that he has built over this period of time that is beginning to show the results?
Yeah.
That's a question we need to ask
and
find a way of validating that. Is it a question of some of the interventions that he proposed and that he pushed out that have allowed us to see this kind of growth? That's again something that we need to debate. Or is it down to the resilience of we as Kenyans? I am still not clear. But I want to agree with his assessment of that of his economic performance. If you look at the tax collection regime, again, the Commissioner General surpassed his targets.
Exactly.
An indication that the economy is doing well.
Yeah.
That's how I'd like to read it.
All right.
If you look at the banks, they're posting profits like they did a year or so ago.
Yeah.
So again, that is an indication that what the president is arguing is correct. So for me, it's a matter of time before we start seeing bigger gains.
Okay.
If this is informed by his economic policies, then we are bound to see even greater results or outcomes going forward.
He also spoke about some organizations that leveraged those difficult situations.
Yeah.
I think one of them was based in Mombasa?
In Mombasa,
and they're actually manufacturing syringes and exporting to the foreign market.
Oh yeah. Kenyans are not only entrepreneurial, they're also very good at sporting opportunities. So that to me would be an example of a Kenyan seeing an opportunity right, under their eyes and saying, I'm going to seize that very, very quickly. And in economics, we call it the fast mover kind of principle, where you move very quickly to capture that market before somebody else thinks about it.
Is it something that can be replicated across the country?
Replicating it can be very difficult because this was very, very special and very specific to a catastrophic situation, a pandemic. And with it came an opportunity. Okay. So when you're talking about innovation, when you're talking about change, when you're talking about creating, I wouldn't classify it as one of those. But as a country, that is what we're called to do, innovate and create. But is there a lesson to be learned from the Mombasa situation? Yes, there is. There is. And the lesson is, whatever the situation, look for where the opportunity sits.
Look for the soup, forget about the fly.
Precisely.
All right. So broadly speaking, I think the country has done very well under the circumstances, and the president projected that extremely well in his speech. The milestones, we all saw them. However, should we, where are their milestones? You're likely to have deficits.
Yeah.
So should we lose sleep over the debt situation? Okay.
And this is something I noted in the president's address. He did not mention the debt situation. We must remember that a lot of what we have done building the country has been sourced from debts. And so it would have been helpful for him also to share his view about the debt situation. I'm particularly concerned reading some of the journals recently, a leading journal in the country that stated that to service the foreign debt, we had to borrow domestically. So that already is a very bad indicator. But then there's nothing wrong with debt. What we need is an ability to sustain or to service that debt. So what the president is left with, and this one he cannot ignore, is to come up with a very elaborate plan on how, as he leaves office, he proposes that Kenya will service its debts. I think the investments that have been put in the ground should start turning very quickly. We should start seeing the returns. And if it does, then the debt situation does not present any problem. But if we do not see significant growth in that investment, and we have these big loans that we need to service, there's going to be a gap. And it's just a matter of time before it becomes a source of pain. A source of pain.
He also spoke about, he registered his concerns about, the wealthy nations shutting doors to the continent of Africa. And why? Omicron, And what do you think we have, because you talked about sustainability, do you think we have a sustainable roadmap for facing the COVID-19 pandemic head-on as a country? I know we've done so well. In fact, the other day there were accolades that were being given to the military for a good job done. But broadly speaking, do you see that roadmap? Is it clear from where you are?
I respectfully don't think so. And mostly because we are dealing with a phenomenon that we don't even understand. We don't know its shape or form.
So we are learning.
It's very amorphous. So we are also learning.
We are learning.
But what we must be very good at, and what the president must be very good at in his team, is find a way and means, put a think tank together that can preempt COVID. what should we expect next? That is preemption.
So rather than react, let's
Rather than react, let's go ahead of it and ask what could go wrong. And that can be done with a very thorough risk assessment and analysis. The second thing that you should be thinking about is what are the ways of detection? Like now, we know we are free of it, but do we have sufficient detection mechanism in country to know that that new variant is not in the country? So that for me would be also a cause for concern. So preempt, ways of detection, and then how do we prevent? So until we are very clear, that would be a problem. Now, second, in his address, he talked about these two forces of advice that came from his team. One side was leaning on the health side of the equation. Another side was leaning on the economic side of the equation. And he says that the health side of the equation won the day, and so he had to shut down the country to save lives. And I do agree with that. But progressively, what did the president do? He opened the country at a time when we had not fully resolved the health issues that are afflicting us.
What were the numbers?
Now, if I'm just going to use one number to argue my case, is we have about 6.9 vaccine administered to date.
Yeah.
You can divide that by 2, assuming that everybody gets 2 doses. That equates to about 3.4 million people having been vaccinated.
In terms of percentage?
In terms of percentage, against the national population, that comes to about 6.6%.
6.6, thereabouts.
So the question then becomes, at 6.6% level of vaccination,
why open?
You've opened the country, yet you said you were informed by the health, or whatever, you're persuaded by the health element of it.
Well, maybe the people.
Maybe the people.
Pressure from the people.
So going forward, in my view, COVID must be attacked in 3 fronts simultaneously. The economic front, the health or medical front, and the social front. Yeah, because I think each of those variables have a way of affecting the other, if not run along with the rest.
Okay.
So for example, economy drives the wealth. The wealth creates the enablement or the capacity to deal with health-related issues.
Okay.
The social aspect of life is also very important from a mental health perspective.
So you create a balance. You create a matrix that has a balance.
That has a balance.
Okay, as you conclude, I talked about the Omicron variant, and the world is watching. What do you think would be the repercussions of another lockdown?
Another lockdown is something we cannot afford as a country. We've been down once. It has been a very, very painful place to be, and Kenyans are resilient. But what you don't want to do with a resilient person is to break them. So we'll have to be very clever and very creative in how we live with that new challenge.
And the president gave a new target that 25 days to Christmas, please let's all go and get our vaccination. Is that a good point to leave it?
That's a good point to leave it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
so much.
I appreciate
Dr.
it.
I really wish we had a lot of time.
Yeah.
Dr. Julian Rowa, conversational expert, thank you.
Thank you
again, and I hope we will invite you to come and just talk to us about this issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.